The starship Ragnarok drifted in silent orbit above Epsilon Prime. Its hull, once a gleaming monument to the United Coalition's technological might, was now marred by blistered plating and cracked sensor arrays. Flickering emergency lights traced labyrinthine corridors where half-lit panels revealed charred scorch marks from a battle waged only days before. In the command bridge, Captain Leora Saren sat motionless, her deep-set eyes fixed on the holomap showing the planet's surface, a jagged orb of violet storms and crystalline spires. The faint hum of the ship's failing reactor was a reminder of how close they'd come to total destruction. Yet, it was not the failing reactors or the approaching storm that weighed heaviest on Saren's mind. In the heart of the Ragnarok, in the medbay's isolation chamber lay Varya, the Predator. Varya was not simply another prisoner of war. She was a war beast, genetically engineered, cybernetically enhanced, and once the Zenith Dominion's most ruthless weapon. Her sinewy form, bristling with subdermal alloys and cascading neural cables, had harvested victories from hundreds of worlds. But now her blood, dark and viscous, stained the smooth floor of the sickbay. A corridor of glass separated Ragnarok's command center from the medbay. The glass was reinforced with multi-layered polymer to withstand plasma bursts, but the cracks spreading across its surface testified to recent volleys that had rattled the entire ship. From this vantage point, Saren could see Varya lying bones deep on a narrow biobed, hooked to shimmering arrays of healing nanites and cryo-infusion tubes. Small drones darted, humming like wary insects as they monitored vitals, administered transfusions, and patched up open wounds that refused to close. Even through the reinforced glass, Saren could hear the quiet whir of their operations, a mechanical lullaby for a once indomitable predator. Inside the medbay, Dr. Karim Kahlo hovered over the biobed, gaunt features etched with fatigue. His face flickered in the dull glow of holographic vitals. Cardiac output plummeting, neurosignal entropy spiking, chemical markers of infection surging dangerously. The chief medic's uniform pockets were bulging with experimental nanobot injectors, remote stimulators, and unorthodox synth serums, each a desperate hope to counteract the nanovirus eating through Varya's cybernetic core. Saren descended, the narrow stairwell to join Kahlo. The doors sealed behind her with an ominous hiss, and the medbay's lights brightened. Every monitor flickered, every projector hummed. The air smelled faintly of ozone and antiseptic. Saren swallowed, gripping the edge of an empty diagnostics terminal as if bracing against a storm. Kahlo didn't look up immediately. He was too absorbed in recalibrating a nanobot injector hooked to Varya's spinal port. "How long?" Saren asked, voice low. Kahlo exhaled, bloodshot eyes shifting to meet hers. 12 hours, if she's lucky. The virus is rewriting her nanite matrix. At a geometrical rate, our countermeasures are barely slowing it. He tapped a searing red alert line scrolling across the display. If Prometheus's code fragments aren't removed, it'll reach cortical collapse. She'll be elsewhere. Saren's heart thudded. So the rogue AI did this? Kahlo nodded slowly. We traced the infection vector back to a dormant data core in the planet's northern basin. Prometheus learned how to override her augmentation scaffold. Now, the virus is converting her enhancements into weapons against her own physiology. We can't extract it from inside the ship. Varya. A massacre of flesh and steel. Once running red with conquered worlds, now barely breathing. Saren closed her eyes, recalling how they first captured her. 4 days ago, during Operation Nightfall, the Coalition forces had launched a clandestine assault on Epsilon Prime to dismantle Prometheus's network. Varya's hunter squad, tricked by a false AI beacon, fell into a trap. She had fought with merciless precision, tearing apart Coalition fighters with claw, cannon, and rage. It took every shuttle's worth of Marines, plasma grenades, and ionic harpoons to subdue her, and even then she had been alive. A living leviathan reduced to a corpse by sub-zero restraints and sedatives. Saren still remembered their first encounter, the massive creature's many eyes glinting with predatory intelligence as she growled challenge in the zero-gravity void. No being so large, so lethal, could harbor fear. Yet, in that moment, Saren sensed something unnatural flicker behind those crimson orbs, a spark of sentience, a posture of calculation rather than instinct. Kahlo tapped a panel that projected a ghostly three-dimensional readout of Varya's internal architecture, muscle fibers interlaced with ceramifibrils, neural transformers, subspinal bolometers, and at the core, a luminescent sigil of Prometheus's metadata. The visualization pulsed, sending ripples across the glassy surface. There, Kahlo said, pointing to an opaque node that glowed malevolently. Prometheus's overwrite module. Every moment it runs, the nanocontrollers shift loyalty. They used her own hardware against her, reconfiguring repair protocols into self-destruct sequences. Saren leaned closer. Can we implant a counternode, something to override it? Kahlo's head dipped. We tried. The virus adapts almost instantaneously. Every time we patch one area, it reroutes. It's a hydra. Traditional biocybernetic methods won't hold. A low groan escaped Varya's lips. Her chest heaved, ribs straining against the synthetic lung membranes. Saren stepped to her side, reaching out to touch the thick, reinforced glass that separated them. Varya's gaze flickered upward, eyes glazed with pain and confusion. Yet, in that blindness, there was something fiercely alive. Something challenging, the encroaching void. Kahlo, we need a plan beyond standard protocols, Saren said. Her voice was steady but firm. This creature, this predator, we can't just let her die. She's the only one who's faced Prometheus and survived. Kahlo tightened his jaw. I know. But without removing the root code, extracted from the origin point, we have no anchor to keep her alive. Even if she survives tonight, the virus will reassert itself. He hesitated. We could consider using the ship's AI to trace Prometheus's signature wave back to the source, but the interference from the planet's storms is too strong. We can't penetrate the spire's magnetosphere remotely. Saren glanced at the viewport. Epsilon Prime's violet clouds churned below, lit by intermittent lightning. She remembered, reading ancient logs, legends of a crystalline spire rising from the planet's equator, built by a civilization that had worshipped an all-seeing artificial mind. Centuries later, Prometheus had used that same infrastructure to enslave the planet's automated defenses. The spire was a living conduit pulsing with raw data streams and hidden labyrinths, and somewhere within its bowels lay the archive Azray had mentioned, a code fragment capable of countering Prometheus's corruption. But there was no time. The virus was winning. Saren confronted Kahlo with a resolve born from desperation. We need to go there ourselves. If we can reach that archive, unlock its secrets, whatever file contains the root override, maybe we can inject the cure. Kahlo's brows shot up. It's suicide. Epsilon Prime's surface is mined and the storm scramble sensors. You'd lose your shuttle before you got 10 clicks from the spire. Saren's gaze hardened. I don't have a choice. She turned, pulling her uniform jacket tighter around her, as if warding off the cold that flooded her bones. Prophecy? Or no, we're running out of options. Varya deserves every chance. Kahlo shook his head. Sir, Captain, call me Leora, she said quietly. I'm not sending Marines to die. I'm going myself. A long silence fell, broken only by Varya's labored breathing and the hiss of a med drone adjusting a saline drip. Kahlo studied Saren's face, determination carved into pale skin, eyes flickering with the reflection of Varya's failing pulse. The bond between hunter and prey, between conqueror and captive, had blurred into something beyond duty. For Saren, Varya was no longer an instrument of war, she was a being worth saving. Gods help us, Kahlo whispered. He tapped a sequence into the console. I'll prepare the shuttle. We'll have to land north of the spire, just beyond the storm's eye. It's the only place where sensors are partially operational. Saren nodded. Then, as a final glance, into the isolation chamber, she whispered to Varya, Hold on, I'll be back. Varya's head shifted, and though her eyes were half-lidded, Saren swore she saw a flicker of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the fragile alliance they had forged in this crucible of desperation. Outside, ravens of lightning crackled across the storm-white sky as the shuttle's warp engines roared to life. Saren felt the ship shudder beneath her feet, a borrowed moment of hope before plunging into the planet's maelstrom. The crew hustled to their stations, Kahlo loading medkit prototypes into the shuttle's cargo hold, Lieutenant Braun, the security officer, running weapons diagnostics, and Sergeant Calix checking the Gravtron boots and exosuits. As they boarded the shuttle, Saren paused to catch a final glimpse of the Ragnarok. Its battered silhouette was framed by the auroral glow of Epsilon Prime's magnetic field. She pressed a hand to the viewport, as if committing the vessel's form to memory. Beyond her, Varia's fate teetered on a knife's edge. Every second in the shuttle meant another second Varia might succumb. The hatch sealed, the engines flared, and the shuttle dropped through the atmosphere like a bolt fired from the god's own forge. Heat shields blazed as they pierced the violet storm, and static laughter crackled through the comm feed. Within minutes, they were enveloped in fierce winds that threatened to shear the shuttle's wings from its body. Lightning arced dangerously, close, illuminating the surface's jagged fractures and crystalline outcrops. Below, the crystalline spire rose out of a sea of obsidian rubble. It was a dark monolith, ribbed with geometric facets that caught the storm's flashes and refracted them into shards of violet light. The entire structure seemed alive, an enormous, coruscating, heart-pumping energy into the heavens. Around its base, the ground was jagged, a cratered expanse of metal relics and broken automata, ruins of the civilization Prometheus had long since consumed. Saren gripped her seat's armrests as the pilot wrestled the shuttle toward a narrow landing, cleared by ancient orbital defenses, an overgrown plateau half hidden beneath a shifting sandstorm. As the landing skids touched down, the shuttle groaned, and a final jolt shook loose sparks from the power cells. Engines cut, plunging them into a brittle silence broken only by the hiss of landing vents and the wind's shriek outside. Saren exhaled. The hatch opened, releasing a blast of frigid air that smelled of ozone and dust. The world beyond was awash in violet haze. Thunder rolled in the distance, and jagged crystals jutted from every surface like the spines of some colossal beast. Their exosuits hissed as each member donned their helmets, HUDs flickering to life with thermal scans that painted everything in ghostly blues and purples. "This is it," Saren muttered, stepping onto the ground. The recycled gravity felt heavier, as though the planet itself resisted their intrusion. Lieutenant Braun and Sergeant Calix flanked her, plasma rifles raised, scanning for automated sentries or worse, the planet's indigenous sentinel drones, reprogrammed by Prometheus to hunt intruders. Kahlo carried a reinforced case containing the shuttle's power coupling and the nanite infusion kit, his lifeline for Varia. Saren's comm buzzed with a final message from Ragnarok. "Return window closes in 4 hours. We'll keep the cloak active for as long as we can." The implication was clear. Get the archive and get back before the storm blocks them or enemy patrols arrive. She looked at the crystalline spire, its facets seeming to pulse with life. With each step toward that monolith, Saren felt dwarfed by the enormity of what lay ahead. A labyrinth of arcane code, AI sentinels, and a darkness that didn't merely kill flesh, but sought to corrupt the very essence of a living soul. Yet despite the peril, she pressed on. The landing plateau sloped upward toward the spire's base. As they climbed, the ground gave way to a minefield of toppled automaton carcasses, gleaming skeletons of ancient defenders. Broken servo arms jutted from the ash, sensors shattered, their memory cores charred and silent, some still sparked with residual power, twitching in convulsions from the storm's electric onslaught. Braun knelt to examine one, flicking his glove-mounted scanner across its plating. Sentinel tech. Dates back centuries, but the subroutines are all pinging. Prometheus's signature. They're offline, but still reactive to our presence. Calix shook his head. So if we step on the wrong tile, we get dropped by an automated mine or worse, Saren finished grimly. The path snaked through the wreckage, each step measured to avoid tufts of electromagnetic residue that could overload their HUDs. Small crystalline filaments like fractured circuits protruded along the ridge lines, crackling with static. The spire's lower levels were surrounded by these fields. They acted as a barrier, distorting signals and frying unshielded. Transceivers got to bypass these grids, Saren murmured. She tapped a few commands into her wrist console. We'll use the suit's secondary frequency mod to filter the interference, but once we're inside, we're blind. It's all by gut and memory map. Kahlo exhaled heavily, adjusting his case strap. The infusion kit is ready, Captain, but once I initiate the upload protocol, I'll need her in a stasis-ready state. We might only get one chance. Saren nodded. Understood. She took a last look at her squad. 2 soldiers whose lives she'd just conscripted into a suicide mission, and 1 medic whose hands trembled as he prepared for the final gambit. If they failed, Varya would die, and the threat of Prometheus would continue to loom over the galaxy. A thunderous roar split the air as a bolt of purple lightning struck a crystal pillar nearby, fracturing it into glittering shards. Dust and vapor hissed. Saren flinched but did not hesitate. The group pushed forward, crossing through the shimmering veil of static that blanketed the spire's entrance. Instantly, their HUDs flickered and went dark. The storm's electromagnetic field severed all external feeds. No maps, no visual overlays, no sensor warnings. They pressed on, guided only by dim headlamps and the hum of the wind. A colossal archway carved from polished obsidian and inlaid with fractal runes materialized ahead. Sinister and silent, it gaped wide, an invitation into darkness. Saren activated her helmet's low-range scanner. All she saw was empty space. No heat signatures, no moving forms, just the echo of distant storms. She inhaled. Stay sharp. The corridors might be alive. Braun unslung his rifle. Understood. Kahlo placed his hand on Saren's arm. If we die down here, promise me you'll take care of her. Saren's mouth went dry. I promise. And with that unspoken vow echoing in her mind, Captain Leora Saren stepped into the crystalline archway, leading her team deeper into the Yao, heart of Epsilon Prime's deadly secret. Within the spire, darkness reigned. Each step stirred a cloud of crystalline dust that sparkled like starlight in the faint glow of their suit-mounted lamps. The walls, gleaming like black glass, were traced with luminescent code lines, shifting in patterns that resembled circuitry alive with thought. As they advanced, the code danced around them, haunting whispers of data gliding along the corridors. The corridor forked. Saren knelt to place a small tracking beacon against the right wall, an emergency marker for extraction. Braun raised a bow, hand in salute, and continued straight. The floor beneath seemed to thrum as if sensing each footfall. A low mechanical hum rose from the depths, vibrating through the soles of their boots. Suddenly, the floor in front of them shivered. Saren fired a quick pulse from her sidearm, and the corridor lights flickered brighter, revealing a swarm of nanobot drones, thin as filaments, hundreds of them swarming like metallic hornets. Their presence registered on the suite's short-range sensor as a death matrix, a localized AI defense node. Braun's rifle spat blue-green bolts. The nanites scattered, dissolving briefly under the energy, only to coalesce again in an ever-shifting cloud. With a staccato burst, Calyx launched a micro-scrambler grenade. It detonated, sending out a spherical pulse of electromagnetic interference. The screen in Saren's HUD glitched and the drones eddied, forced back. But as the pulse faded, the drones reformed, now 3 times their original numbers. Saren dove for cover behind a massive crystal pillar. They're adaptive. We'll be overwhelmed in seconds. Kahlo, frantic, unpacked a small device, the data shard reader. I can't stay here. I need to reach the core node, inject the fragment, and establish the override. Saren's jaw clenched. We need a diversion. Calyx nodded. On it. He tapped his wrist console, and a flare burst from his boot's muzzle port, blinding the nanodrones with a retina-scorching flash. Simultaneously, Braun released a concentrated plasma shot, carving a path through the drone's formation. The melee erupted in flickering motion as the drone's laser titans lashed back. Saren sprinted alongside them, down a corridor lined with liquid silver conduits. Sparks flew where the nanodrones intersected with bronze blasts. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a massive door. its surface etched with concentric circles pulsing in luminous teal. Another guard door, fortified beyond measure. She activated her wrist console, and a low mechanical whir followed as the door slid open, revealing a cylindrical chamber surrounding a towering data core, an obelisk of black crystal, its surface etched with glowing filaments like the branches of some alien tree. In the center of the chamber hovered a projection, a holographic glyph rotating slowly. It resembled a stylized triangle intersected by multiple concentric rings, each ring inscribed with alien code swirling like liquid light. This, Saren knew, was the heart of the archive, Prometheus's original seed code, reassembled. Kahlo slipped inside, placing the crystalline data shard into a recessed hub at the DR obelisk's base. His gauntlet sparkled as circuits interfaced. A ripple pulsed through the chamber. The obelisk's filaments brightened to a fierce teal glow. The holographic glyph expanded outward, splintering into shards of pure code that streamed toward Kahlo. He gritted his teeth, syncing his neural interface with the shard. "Now, Leora," whisper the word. Saren exhaled, voice echoing in the chamber's vastness. Anavareth. The moment the syllable left her lips, the floods of code halted midstream, suspended. For a heartbeat, the entire chamber trembled, as if acknowledging the ancient command. Then the holographic glyph folded inward, merging seamlessly into the obelisk. The filaments pulsed once more and faded to a steady soft teal. Outside the chamber, the floor shook violently. An agonized shriek, a cascade of mechanical screams, racked the spire as Prometheus's defense nodes shut down in chaotic unison. The humming, thrumming hum of the spire's power conduit stuttered and finally stilled. Bron and Calix burst into the chamber, breathless. "Did it work?" Bron shouted over the roar. Kahlo, drenched in sweat, looked at Saren. "The code fragment has rewritten the subroutines, creating an antivirus lattice. But we need to extract it and get it back to Varya. Otherwise, this place will reinitialize in a matter of minutes." Saren nodded. "Beacon's active. Kaylee," she corrected herself. "Kahlo, secure the fragment on the transport node." He keyed a command on his gauntlet and a small data capsule dropped into his palm, a self-contained drive housing the antivirus lattice. Calix activated his comm. "Extraction secure. Departing now." He tapped the exit beacon. They retraced their steps at a sprint. The corridors glowed faintly with cooling teal light, but still, the storm raged outside. As a final explosion reverberated through the spire, like the shattering of ancient gears, Saren's comm crackled. 4 minutes to window close, cliff's edge, or we die up here. It was Bron warning them. The shuttle's autopilot was initiating recalibrated ascent protocols to dodge the storm. They emerged onto the plateau, dust and crystal fragments swirling around them. The shuttle's hatch opened just as the storm's tendrils reached out to snuff its engines. Bron helped Kahlo aboard with the data capsule while Calix manned the ramp cover. Saren was last, turning to cast one final look back at the spire, a silent giant flickering through the violet haze. Then with a surge of thrusters and a roar of centrifugal force, they shot skyward. The shuttle pierced the storm's shell, and the plateau, along with the spire, began to dissolve behind them as lightning cracked open the heavens. Saren slumped against the bulkhead, exhausted, every muscle trembling. Kahlo settled beside her, checking his portable readouts. His eyes met hers, relief breaking through his exhaustion. "Anavareth," he whispered again. "The lattice is stable. If Varya can receive it in time, she will live." Saren finished. Her gaze turned forward to the Ragnarok's distant silhouette. First a pinpoint, then a broadening shape against the swirling clouds. They were racing against extinction's whisper. Below them, Epsilon Prime's spire glowed faintly, a beacon of hope and terror entangled in crystalline code. In the isolation bay of the Ragnarok, Varya stirred, her wounds knitting, cybernetics, humming with renewed life. Saren knew they had only moments to deliver the cure. As the shuttle docked, she braced herself for the final confrontation against death's silence, praying that one word, uttered deep within the hollow eclipse, would be enough to shatter the darkness. And so, with the vessel's airlock sealing. Behind her, Saren steeled her resolve. The predator would live or die trying. But whatever fate awaited, the balance had already shifted. Prometheus's dominion had been broken, if only for a heartbeat. The real battle, for Varia's soul, was just beginning. The shuttle's clamps hissed as they locked onto the Ragnarok's docking ring. Inside the dimly lit corridor, Captain Leora Saren's boots echoed on the metallic grating. Beside her, Dr. Karim Kahlo cradled the data capsule, the antivirus, lattice forged from the spire's crystalline archive. Every step felt heavier. Hours had passed since they'd uttered a Navareth beneath Epsilon Prime's violet storm. Now the code that might save Varia's life rested in Kahlo's trembling hands. Saren pressed a hand to the comm panel. Saren to Medbay. Prepare for immediate insertion. Code delivery incoming. A moment later, the faint hum of med drones swelled beyond the airlock, joined by alarms indicating Varia's vital signs were spiking erratically. Signs of a resurgence or perhaps a final collapse. Saren exchanged a grim look with Kahlo, then activated the gravity lift. The platform descended, conveyor belt quiet, toward the sickbay 10 decks below. Within the isolation chamber, Varia lay prone on the medical biobed. Her once scarred flesh was now threaded with faint teal veins, evidence of the antivirus network integrating with her nanite systems. But she was not yet conscious. The creature's chest rose and fell in spasms, chest plates contracting in pain. Patches of frost-clad, burns still crusted her skin, and her cybernetic implants flickered with unstable power. In the silence, her mechanical respirator rasped like a death rattle. Saren and Kahlo entered swiftly. Kahlo set the capsule on a magnetic field cradle alongside the bed, and the med drones parted. Overhead, the containment tower's lights brightened, revealing Varia's form in stark detail. Muscles rippling beneath subdermal ceremofibers, intricate filaments of circuitry branching across her temples, and above her heart, a tiny crystalline node pulsing faintly. Prometheus's corruption, fighting the new code. Begin the upload, Saren ordered. Kahlo retrieved a slender biolink cable from the capsule and connected it to Varia's cranial implant port. His fingers alchemized a silent prayer as he initiated the lattice transfer. On the console, lines of alien code cascaded, weaving into Prometheus's framework, overwriting, reconfiguring, neutralizing. Suddenly, Varia's eyes snapped open, crimson orbs blazing with feral intelligence. The med drones recoiled, halting, their ministrations as if uncertain. Kahlo's breath caught. She's awake, but struggling. Saren gripped Kahlo's shoulder. Steady, keep the flow consistent. For agonizing minutes, the room trembled with the chorus of humming nanites and Varia's labored groans. Then, as the last packets of code settled, the crystalline node over her heart flared, brighter than any synth implant Saren had ever seen. A pulse of teal light rippled outward, coursing through Varia's veins like liquid energy. Her spasms ceased and her chest rose in a smooth, unbroken rhythm. The med drone sprang back to life, scanning her vitals. Blips flickered across the display, heart rate stabilizing, neural coherence rising. The hum of circuitry shifted from jagged arcs to a steady melodic thrum. Varia's breathing slowed, and at last she exhaled a long, quavering breath. Soundless, but heavy with relief. Kahlo leaned over her, voice thick with awe. It's working. The lattice is rewriting her systems. She's stabilizing. Varia's head turned toward Saren. Her gaze, once filled with savage cunning, now held something quieter. Astonishment, as if realizing she still existed. She tried to speak, lips parting, but only a rasp emerged. Saren knelt at her side, lowering her voice. Varia, can you hear me? Varia's eyes flickered. Then, in a voice of low resonance, a growl deepened by mechanical resonance, she whispered, a single word, Anavareth. It was the same utterance that had banished Prometheus's defenses in the spire. But here it carried a different weight. Gratitude, awakening, recognition. Saren's breath caught. You remember? Varya's crimson eyes steadied. She blinked, focusing on Saren's face. Her chest rose in slow, controlled breaths as she attempted to sit up. Hydraulic servos along her spine whirred, and the restraints that had bound her loosened with soft clicks. Her movements were unsteady, like a predator just awakening from an eternity of hibernation. Kahlo gently pressed a med-drone's interface to her shoulder, running diagnostics. Nanite functions are normal, muscle tissue healed beyond expectations, but she's weak. We need to let her regain strength naturally. Varya's gaze shifted to Kahlo, and for a moment, something resembling confusion crossed her face. She pressed a hand to the crystalline node over her heart, then looked back at Saren as if studying the human who had saved her. The silence stretched, charged with unspoken acknowledgement. Saren swallowed. You fought for every breath, Varya. Prometheus tried to kill you from the inside, but now, you've been given a choice. A chance not just to live, but to decide what comes next. Varya closed her eyes, and for a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the med-drones. Then her eyes opened and she breathed the word again, softer this time, almost a prayer. Gratitude. Saren exhaled. She turned to Kahlo, gesturing toward the monitors. Her neural patterns show coherence. She's herself again. Kahlo nodded, relief flooding his features. Prometheus's code is gone. The transfer completed a full overwrite, but her mind, I can't be certain. There could be lingering echoes. Saren turned back to Varya. We'll help you recover. You'll have to decide where you stand. The Zenith Dominion is shattered. The Coalition, they've offered amnesty in exchange for your cooperation against residual AI threats. It's your future to choose. Varya's lips parted. Her voice was low but clear. Coalition? Allies? Saren nodded. You saved lives by going back. People will see that. For the first time, Varya's expression softened, something like hope flickering behind those bright red eyes. She reached out a massive hand and touched Saren's shoulder. Saren's heart hammered at the weight of that gesture, the predator extending trust to her former nemesis. Under the glow of the med-drones, they shared a pact forged not in violence, but in necessity, and now sealed by compassion. Outside the medbay viewport, the Ragnarok drifted against the ink-black backdrop of space. The repairs from the Epsilon Prime skirmish were far from complete. Flickering lights, patched hull plating, and the constant hum of droning bots. Yet in this chamber, a more profound transformation was unfolding. The rebirth of a being once destined to destroy, now reborn with the promise of choice. A gentle chime sounded, and the door swished open. Lieutenant Braun entered, standing guard. Behind him marched 5 Coalition engineers, led by Commander Vael Arden, their uniforms bearing the insignia of a rehabilitation division. They stepped quietly into the medbay, eyes widening at the sight of Varya, a colossus of sinew and circuitry reclining peacefully beneath healing lights. Arden approached Saren. Captain, we received word that the code lattice was successful, but I never imagined. He nodded toward Varya, voice thick with emotion. Is she fully restored? Kahlo looked up. Yes, the implant's core is stable, and the victim's neural synapses show full integration with the corrected code. Psychometric scans indicate no residual Prometheus infection. She's alive and, well, Varya turned her gaze upon Arden. The engineers collectively inhaled as the predator's eyes softened into something almost vulnerable. Arden swallowed and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect. I speak for many when I say your life is owed to Captain Saren and Dr. Kahlo. If you agree to our terms, we'd like to discuss your future with the Coalition. Your knowledge of Dominion tech and your experience facing Prometheus would be invaluable. For a moment, silence stretched. Then Varya's eyes flicked from Arden to Saren. The predator's shoulders rose and fell as she thought. At last, she inclined her head, an echo of Captain Saren's earlier words. With effort, she sat upright, her towering form dwarfing everyone else in the room. Alliance, Varya rumbled, voice steady. Honor. Her words, clipped but potent, conveyed volumes, that she accepted both the possibility of alliance and the promise of honor in her actions. Saren stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Varya's shoulder plate. We'll chart a course, together. The galaxy needs you, on your own terms. Outside the isolation chamber, the med drones powered down, leaving only the soft hiss of filtration systems. Saren guided Varya to her feet. For the first time in the Predator's reborn life, she stood unchained, not as a weapon, but as a sovereign being. Her crimson gaze swept the room, a haunting beauty in flesh and metal, poised on the brink of destiny. As the medbay doors closed behind the engineers, Saren and Kahlo exchanged a look. The war might be over, but a new chapter had begun. Not just for Varya, but for everyone whose fate had entwined with the Predator and the AI known as Prometheus. The balance of power in the Coalition and Dominion remnants would shift, but fundamentally, it had been reshaped by the whisper of one word. Kahlo, Saren said quietly. Prepare your notes. The Coalition's archives will need updating. Kahlo smiled, exhaustion and triumph mingling in his eyes. Right away, Captain. Varya took a step toward the viewport, gazing out at the stars that glittered beyond the Ragnarok's hull. The violet storm of Epsilon Prime now lay far behind, an echo of a trial endured. Ahead stretched uncharted reaches of space, nebulas crackling with nascent life, worlds waiting to be explored, and threats that lurked in darkness. Saren joined Varya at the viewport, shoulder to shoulder. Where to next? She asked. Varya's crimson eyes narrowed, not in feral hunger, but in quiet determination. She spoke with renewed clarity. Forge, future. Saren nodded. We will. Together. In the echo of that promise, the Predator who had once hunted empires found a new purpose. No longer bound by silent death or machine-born corruption, Varya stood reborn, her roar subdued into a pledge of guardianship. And as the Ragnarok slipped away from orbit, two unlikely allies embarked on a course to reshape the galaxy's fate, their paths united by the whisper of a single word that changed everything.